when you talk to these people that are pro AI, once you start ferreting, what they actually start telling you is we don't know yet, but AI is going to solve all of our problems. And if we can just develop, the AI will be so smart that it's going to solve all the problems that it's going to create.
Going to create the problem and solve
right.
it.
So all of the electricity, all the water, all the natural gas, all of the harm, and I'm not a liberal, Chris, I'm not a liberal. All right. But it's like, even I'm starting to wonder how many data centers we need in West Texas with these gigantic natural turbines powering this thing. And if you go visit these towns where these data centers are popping up and they can't get the electric there, you have these huge turbines and it's choking the people living in these towns. Welcome to episode 94 of the Weekly Docket, a podcast by the Silberman Law Firm where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is October 30th, 2025. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host, and I'm joined by Chris Heald, who is our supervising attorney at the firm. Chris, what are you dressing up for Halloween?
Nothing. That was an easy one.
And what are your kids dressing up as?
I couldn't tell you that one either. They have a lot of costumes that they recycle.
Okay. This year I'm going to be Pharaoh because I've got a 5-year-old who's obsessed with Egypt. So I am Pharaoh. Yeah, does that look because I have a Jewish background and you think I'm dressing up as my oppressor? Was that what that was?
I wasn't sure. That was one of my thoughts. Yes.
Okay. I've got another question for you. We were talking about controversial, offensive questions. And sometimes you lament that we complain about associates and complain about less experienced attorneys as the turnover and things like that. But I was playing tennis with a friend of mine, and he's got a son that's an associate at a big firm. We have not talked about this big firm before, but if I were to mention it, you would know that firm. I just don't want to mention it on the podcast. They're in the Houston office, their incoming class of associates, they pay them $200,000 a year, something like that. They started with 12, and after 3 years, they have 2 left. So they've lost 10. What do you think about that?
I think for big firms, I don't know the numbers. I know the people that I know that did it 15 years ago. That 3 years is a pretty big benchmark because I think they have to pay their bonus back if they don't stay 3 years. So a lot of people try to make that 3-year mark and then jet to go in-house because that big firm lifestyle is not for everyone. Working 90 hours a week, seeing your family, that's not a life for everyone.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the big firms are really lamenting that they need to have more stay than 2. That's a loser for them. That's the problem. And smaller firms our size, we're facing some of those similar challenges, but just throwing that out there. All right, let's go and talk about what's on our docket today. We've got a couple legal questions and a little mini rant and rave. First legal question is, we're going to call it, I'm owed $5,500 and a general contractor owes me that money. How do I make them pay? ? All right. Then we're going to answer another question about liens that show up on Schedule C. If you're buying a house and you're a buyer, what do I do? Chris is laughing because we have probably a couple of these cases at our firm that have come up recently. So that's the source of our questions this week. And then in our mini rant and rave, we're going to talk about the AI math not mathing. So Chris is not a fan of AI, so I think Chris is actually going to like this piece because it's anti-AI. And if Chris is anything, he has anti-artificial intelligence.
If I am anything.
Let's go ahead and get it kicked off with some questions. So here's the first legal question we're doing. I'm only owed $5,500. The only may have been my insertion, but I'm only owed $5,500. How do I make him pay? We call it the small dollar bluff. What do you think? We send him a demand letter and threaten to sue. Are we okay with that? Is that a good strategy? Does that work sometimes?
I know a guy who you can send who's really good at collecting.
Yeah.
Are we not allowed to get
No, we cannot encourage, as lawyers, we cannot encourage people to engage in criminal acts. So we can't do that. So let's assume that's off the table.
Is it criminal?
Yeah, I think it is. The kneecaps and all that.
Yeah. Hey, I don't know what he says. I don't know what he does. I just know he goes out there and he comes back with some money.
Right.
But that's all I know. Okay. I think he's just a persuasive guy. Yeah, to answer your question, I think that's really the only thing you can do. And I think most people understand that you're not going to sue and the other side knows you're not going to sue. You can take them to small claims court, but a lot of times it's get the attorney involved, make the demand, bring some credibility to your argument to maximize your chances of getting paid. And we do the best we can to get them paid economically. It does not make sense to throw $5,000 after a $5,000 problem.
Yeah.
We're doing our best to maximize your return. That's what we're trying to do.
And sometimes they do pay. Sometimes they get a demand letter, they pay, or you settle it. But that's a good point about often the other side will know. They'll take the risk. Like, hey, this is a bluff. They're not going to sue me over $5,000.
And I can tell you in dead seriousness, people ask this question and I answer it very truthfully. They say, look, am I just wasting my money? And it's possible. It is possible that you're throwing your letter in the trash. But I can dead seriously tell you in cases where I would not have expected them to pay, they immediately cut a check. And in cases where I thought, hey, this is pretty straightforward, these people will likely work with you, they've been the most difficult to work with ever. You will be surprised. So when they ask for a prediction, my answer is you just don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's worth the shot. We do our best. We understand the situation. We want to do what's best for you economically. It's worth a try.
Well said. Very well said. The other option or thing I'll mention, and this just happened, is sometimes a client comes to you and they want their money. They feel like they're owed their money and they're entitled to their money. And so what can I do if it doesn't make economic sense to pay you $5,000 retainer to pursue this? How do I right this wrong? The justice courts, the small claims courts, are a really good option for this. Now, you still can't hire an attorney from a math standpoint, as far as the cost of this thing going, because the hourly rates and all that, you still can't do that. But the beautiful thing about the design of small claims courts are, it's only a couple $100 to file the petition, get the person served, and then you can just go down there and tell your story. There are no rules of evidence in JP court. Chris, can you describe to the listeners how, if they were to file in county court or district court and be unrepresented, what challenge they might have if they were to go into sort of these higher level courts and trying to tell their story and present their case in narrative form?
If you're going to the higher level courts, they're going to be a lot stricter enforcing the rules of evidence. And the other side might object, or the judge just may not indulge you as much. And the judge may cut you off. Or if you say, I'd like to see your contract, or you say, I'd like to show you my contract. And they say, are you trying to get this admitted into evidence? Are you offering this? And sometimes they'll indulge you, sometimes they won't. But JP court, like you said, it's Judge Judy, it's Judge Wapner. You bring whatever documents you want, you stand at the podium, the judge will look at whatever you want him to look at.
Yeah.
They'll look at it, they'll let you talk, they'll let the other side talk, they'll make a decision.
Yeah. So JP courts are perfect for that. And Chris went exactly where I wanted him to go, which is it can be really challenging to get things into evidence if you don't have an attorney and you're supposed to follow a formula and there's a process at these courts. Chris is the guy who, if there were a pro se party on the other side, Chris is going to object to hearsay if a pro se party is trying to get things into evidence. And then that pro se, that guy without an attorney, he is going to be like a deer in headlights. So JP courts are a great place to try to go down there, tell your story. And the jurisdiction currently in Texas is up to $20,000. So a $5,000 claim roundabout is perfect for that kind of thing. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next question. There are liens that need to be taken care of on my new home purchase on Schedule C. What do I do as a buyer? This has come up. This was a case I've been working on for a couple of weeks now with another associate at the firm. Let's start off with what is Schedule C. Chris, can you enlighten us?
The Schedule C is all the problems. It's not all problems. Sometimes it includes additional information, but it's basically all the defects in title. That these are all things that need to be taken care of in order to get you a clean title. One of those things that show up are liens, and your mortgage will show up on there. This mortgage needs to be paid off because when you buy a house, you don't want the guy who bought it before you don't want his mortgage staying on the property.
Yeah.
So it'll have all kinds of encumbrances on there, all kinds of information as well.
Yeah. So Schedule C is the stuff that needs to be done before it closes. And if it doesn't get taken care of, then it's going to move to Schedule B. And that's a bad thing because Schedule B means the title company's not going to cover it. They're excluding it from the policy, and you certainly want to be covered. Now, this is rare in residential transactions, but if you've got something that needs to be taken care of on Schedule C, and it's not getting taken care of and it moves to Schedule B, you're going to have to object. And there's a process in the TREC contract, that's the standard 1-to-4 single family contract, where once the buyer gets the title commitment, the buyer typically needs to object before closing or some set number of days. So you send the objection over, say, hey, I object to these items. And then what you're doing is that sets the seller clock ticking to where the seller now has 15 days to cure. The seller does not have to cure. If the seller has to spend money to cure, then the seller doesn't have to do it. The seller could just say, I'm not going to cure or not say anything. And then it goes back to the buyer. The ball's back in the buyer's court, and the buyer has to decide to waive and close or say, hey, no, I'm terminating. I won't earn this money back. So those are some.
Aren't you automatically Isn't your Schedule C considered like an automatic objection?
It is, yes. And that's an excellent point, but it's not quite an automatic objection. It's what it really is. The contract says the buyer cannot waive anything on Schedule C. These contracts are done by the Broker Lawyer Committee at the Texas Real Estate Commission. And we want to protect people. We want to protect buyers buying homes because typically they're not sophisticated players like in commercial transactions. So we say that buyer, we don't want you to waive what's on Schedule C, but it's tricky. Things could move. You usually don't see this, but it could. Things could move from Schedule C to Schedule B, and then the buyer would have to object because then they're no longer under that protection in Schedule C. So yeah, that's how that works. You got to be careful. Sometimes there's a little bit of gotchas and traps. This is another good example of when you probably need to have an attorney. Your realtor is not qualified to do that kind of stuff. So in fact, the realtors will often make it worse. In this one transaction I would get these bizarre convoluted realtor emails and that are just, oh, everything's going to be fine. The transaction is going to close. What that really is, I want my commission. Please don't screw this up. So the realtor doesn't understand what's going on, nor they have that lien as a priority, and they're not qualified to do that. But okay, that brings us to usually my favorite part of the show. This is a little rant and rave section. And this is a big passion of mine right now. I can't figure out this market. I can't figure out what's going on in the world. Everything is AI. And the title of this section is The AI Math Does Not Math. Chris, have you been following the numbers at all behind the business model of AI generally and what's going on and whether all of what we're spending, we collectively as a society and our companies, and do you follow that at all or not? Not really.
I do not.
Okay. So here's what's going on. And the whole world, or mostly the Magnificent Seven stocks, these big seven stocks, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, and others, they're spending all of this money on capital expenditures, mostly chips and data centers and things like this, to get the AI developed and get it better. How much is that costing? Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, he said, oh, it's going to be in the trillions. That's probably a bit of an exaggeration. We think it's somewhere around $400 to $500 billion every year that needs to be spent on AI capital expenditure. So, Chris, does that sound like a big number to you?
It does. It's one of those incomprehensible numbers that we can write them, but do any of us really understand what those numbers are? No, we do not.
The shareholders do certainly, and the board at some of these Magnificent Seven companies, I'm not sure that they understand the numbers, despite the fact that's real money being spent by places like Meta and Microsoft. So they're spending $500 billion a year. Let's just say that's the number. Where is that money? A lot of money is going to NVIDIA. That's why NVIDIA became the first company worth $5 trillion today, or yesterday. Now, what happens to NVIDIA when all those companies, those other 7 companies or whatever, or 6 companies, stop spending the money on their chips? NVIDIA's valuations probably go down. Do you have an asset collapse? Maybe. I don't know. But the mass
chips are probably the most desired thing right now. Everybody needs them, and there's not enough of them.
Yeah.
No one can make enough chips.
No, but he's not talking about potato chips. So the issue, though, is no one can make enough because the 6 other big technology companies are buying all their chips. And that's fine, but we're wondering, why are we spending so much money? And is this justified? And here's the math problem. The money from the actual end use of AI, that's like the ChatGPT subscriptions for $20 a month. And like Lexus is trying to sell us AI-induced research, and Westlaw's trying to sell us Co-Counsel, and there's Harvey. And all the money for end uses of AI is, we think it's about $12 or $13 billion a year. So we're spending $500 billion in capital expenditures, and that doesn't even include like the operating expenses that these companies are spending, like the employees to support all this. That's just capital expenditures. But we're only getting $12 billion in revenue. That's not profit, it's revenue. So there's a huge gap. Where do we come up with the other $480 billion just to break even on this deal?
You have to ask one if they figure that they're going to be first to the end. They're going to solve the equation and they're going to rule the world.
Your guess is actually very close. The way you described it, the terms you use, like rule the world, it's be the first to the end. There's actually a religiosity behind it. Okay. When you talk to these people that are pro AI, once you start what they actually start telling you is, we don't know yet, but AI is going to solve all of our problems. And if we can just develop, the AI will be so smart that it's going to solve all the problems that it's going to create.
Going to create the problem and solve it.
Right. So all of the electricity, all the water, all the natural gas, all of the harm, and I'm not a liberal, Chris, I'm not a liberal. All right. But it's like, even I'm starting to wonder how many data centers we need in West Texas with these gigantic natural turbines powering this thing. And if you go visit these towns where these data centers are popping up and they can't get the electric there, you have these huge turbines, and it's choking the people living in these towns. I'm not a tree hugger. I'm a conservative, physically responsible guy, but I don't want rural people in small towns to not be able to breathe.
I think, look, I'm with you. I'm as big a free market capitalist as there is, but this kind of exposes some of that. It exposes that you want to believe that the market is going to dictate, and what's going to be good for all of us is what's going to happen. But then, you do see the argument the other side. The corporations actually control everything, and they actually can have a negative impact. Not everything is driven by just pure fundamental economics that are going to result in good for all.
It's a math problem. Somebody said the ad revenue. Have you used any of the AI browsers yet? OpenAI just released one called Atlas. It's available on Macs. I know you're a big Mac guy. Perplexity has one, I think, called Comet. I think that's right. And of course, there's Google's Gemini. I do encourage you to use some of these browsers. They are doing good things. And you can see that they're laying the foundation to sell advertising. But even if you think about, is that going to be enough money? Google is the biggest ad business that the world has ever seen in the history of man. And Google's ad business, I think, is still just a $300 billion business a year. So you still have this huge shortfall. Even if AI became the biggest ad business that the world has ever seen, you still can't generate enough money to get there. So I'm in this camp, just like a regular guy, like trying to do the math. Where's the money going to come from? And I'm thinking, I'm scared to death to invest in this. And this is not an investing. I'm scared to death to invest in the stock market. I'm scared to death that we're going to have this gigantic asset collapse, because I like real money. I like the tangible returns, and I don't see any tangible returns. So that is my rant right now. and I don't know where it's coming from. And if you get one of these guys on these financial shows and they just start talking in the abstract about this is all going to be amazing eventually, I want to punch him in the face.
Maybe that's an indication the tide is turning, because this is how ideas work. People are skeptical, then they buy in, and then the hype train really gets going. And then people start to question whether the hype train is actually worth being on.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where we are in this cycle.
All right. Maybe it is. We'll see how it comes out. Okay. I think it's all going to collapse. So anyway. All right. That brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Chris Hield has been my co-host today. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcasts. And as a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice. And this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com and tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great day and enjoy the rest of your week.